Welcome everybody. This is hopefully the first of many webinars, really just designed around getting the most out of the Growlink software. We're going to be talking a lot about Copilot growing strategies today. Um, if you have individual support questions, something's not working, something like that, feel free to just drop it in the QA. We'll take that, offline. This is more just kind of like a community type of thing, trying to help everyone with with general help stuff. But if you do have some issues that you're trying to get resolved, more than happy to pull you aside, get a support ticket going with you, get someone to reach out to you and help you one-on-one. So how we're going to handle this is basically you'll see down at the bottom there's a Q&A section. Um, you guys should have access to that and should be able to start dropping questions in there if you have them. This is really going to be driven by you guys. We're here to answer questions that you might have, both technical and cultivation related. Marcus is here as the main cultivation advisor. Myself and Ray are here as technical advisors. And yeah, we're here to do whatever you need. We don't really have an agenda outside of answering your guys' questions. So this is, like I said, this is kind of to pardon the looseness of this first one because this is an experiment and we just kind of wanted to start getting out there, helping you guys answer questions. So we'll give a minute, hopefully, to have some questions roll in here, and from there we'll just start doing our thing. If anybody wants to talk, you're more than welcome to also raise your hand and talk about something specific, and we'll unmute you. We'll start talking. If you need to share your screen to show us something like on your Growlink platform, we'll give you the ability to share your screen as well. So yeah, we'll let everybody kind of get comfortable here, and hopefully we'll start getting the discourse going.
Yeah, we didn't plan for anything here. This is very unstructured, but again, it's meant to help out whatever you guys have problems with. So
All right, so Daniel just dropped something in here for us, Marcus.
6x6 Rockwool, 7-day veg from rooted, how to dry back once drinking without reducing moisture capacity. Oh, meaning like not losing fuel capacity total, I'm assuming.
That's what I think he means, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, 6x6 Rockwool, if you're going in, I'm assuming you're plugging the clone directly in there. 7-day veg, that's a pretty, young plant there from rooted. Um, because you're in veg, you're going to be steering vegetatively typically. And so your dry back should not be really exceeding 10 to 15% at that point. Really, unless you're going hydrophobic, which is not going to happen unless you're doing some extreme generative steering and early flower, that's really the only time you really lose field capacity. Apart from the standard, like, hey, I'm losing a couple percent here and there, by the weeks, which is from root growth. That's going to happen throughout the whole cycle, but that's not something that you really need to be concerned with. Um, so yeah, when I'm doing rock wool, it's almost always going to be, especially I do start in 4x4s, not the 6x6s. So I can afford a little bit of I can push it like I can only do a 10% dry back. And then because it's not taking that long in between days that I'm going to be giving irrigations. Because you're in a 6x6, I would probably push a little bit higher, maybe like 15%. And that way it's pulling in enough oxygen at that point that you're not going to cause any type of dampening or, algae or any growth like that. You do need to give it some oxygen in there. But I wouldn't, if you keep it between 10 to 15%, you're not going to be worried. I wouldn't be worried about losing moisture capacity at all. Um,
Great. Anything else you need to add to that?
I was just going to say, I mean, if there is a certain threshold when it comes to fuel capacity that we don't really want to go below, and I try to always keep it at a minimum of 50%, especially in Rockwool, you should be a bit higher than 50%. 55 is usually the minimum we try to go for there. So if you end up like saying, oh, well, I can only get up to, let's just say 45% or something like that, and then you have the natural loss of fuel capacity from root growth or whatever ends up happening. That's a sign that I would probably lower my probe a little bit in the block because that just tells me that I've got it placed a little too high. Or maybe I stabbed into an air pocket or something like that, and that open air inside the block is causing a lower reading. But as long as you're above 50%, try to shoot a little higher, but at a bare minimum 50%, you're totally good there.
Great. Uh, Let us know if you need to follow up on that anymore, Daniel. Great. We're getting some. Before we move to those, I saw Dan put something in here. He just asked, I know very little about irrigation strategy. Would Copilot still help me?
Copilot will help you learn if you explore through the program, read the tooltips. We also have, there's an Athena guide that is going to be very helpful out there. We have a ebook that's a little bit outdated now. I mean, we put that out over 2 years ago. It was like 3 years ago or something at this point, but it's got a lot of good fundamentals inside of it that I would definitely read up on. Obviously, pull all the information you can. We also have another guide that I just updated for Copilot that I think is going to be a major help for you, but it's not quite finished yet. We're trying to finish up all the illustrations and everything on it. Look out for that. That will be dropped soon. I think that'll also help you as well. But we do have presets. So like when you go through the Copilot program, you select generative, you select vegetative, whatever it happens to be in there. We do have presets that will auto populate certain percentages if you're trying to steer generative or vegetative. Those work on a broad scale. It's definitely not the best solution for everything. Like if you're really trying to learn, it's doable. Um, you just really got to pay attention to what's going on. And that could be something that, you can, well, I mean, I'm sure we'll end up covering that in detail. Like, I don't want to break into all of that right now, but I mean, that's what the point of these meetings are, is we're going to go through everything I know about crop steering, everything, how I use Copilot to do it. So as long as you're tuned in, I'm sure we're going to get questions that are going to dive in much more, narrowed down. And so we don't have to just go super broad on that, but we're definitely going to get you taken care of when it comes to that.
Yeah, that's good. Dan, and if you go onto our website, go to our support side, there's a little AI chatbot. Just ask for the crop steering guide. That'll at least give you like the last version that we did, and there's still good information in there. And I feel like everybody should read that before they start getting into it.
Yeah, it can. I mean, here's the other thing I will add to that. Copilot on its own is a timer program with a whole bunch of advanced features that allow you to really tune things in. So you have like the ability for a fail-safe, you have the ability to lock your field capacity. You can do a lot of cool things that you don't even have to use the AI portion of it. The AI portion of it is where you could potentially get into trouble. So if you happen to set your targets wrong or your sensor data is not so great and it's feeding it bad data, the combination of that can lead you to get less than desirable suggestions. And if you're on autopilot, it's going to make those changes, and then you're going to be like, whoa, what the fuck's going on? And that's where you're going to run into trouble. If you just run it on Copilot, it is just going to run the timers that you have. It will still generate the suggestions for you so you can maybe learn from that, understand, is this right? Is this not right? Maybe ask support, ask me, email me, be like, hey, why is it saying this? This doesn't make sense. And then, we can kind of dive deeper at that point. But running Copilot is safe in my opinion. It's the exact same as running a timer program with added safeguards. Just don't turn it to autopilot until you really understand what's going on, I would say.
Yeah, autopilot to me is the kind of you're running with the system at that point. Copilot is kind of walking with it. Dan, let us know if you need any more follow-up on that one, buddy. Marcus, let's see your next one. We have Jory, curious on whether under canopy lighting will drastically alter the feeding strategy.
Absolutely. It's going to not only alter your feeding strategy, it's also going to have to alter your climate control strategy as well. When you bring in that light inside, not only are you causing the plant to transpire more, you're going to increase the humidity load in the room, the total or transpiration. You're also going to have a lot of heat buildup in there. That heat buildup can manifest in a whole lot of ways, but the biggest way when it comes to irrigation is it is going to cause your plants to drink more. So you're going to find your drybacks are going to happen quicker and you're going to need a lot more shots, especially if you're doing like a vegetative steer, bulk flower, you're shooting a lot of P2s, or trying to maintain a set dryback overnight, you're going to be using the failsafe, depending on your substrate size. So if you end up with which that's what crop steering is all about, that seems to be the best way to go about it. People are trying to find the smallest substrate they can, uh, without obviously causing root bound issues or anything like that. They don't want to, stress the plant too much, but they do want to keep things as small as and as controlled as possible so that they can push whatever things that they want. For example, like I want to make sure I can hit a 30% dryback. Well, I can't do that if I pop a tiny plant into a 7-gallon pot, so without the root mass to accompany it. So it does affect it, and it can make things it just, I mean, you're fine. If you're using Growlink, you're fine. You've got substrate sensors more than likely, and you've got irrigation control where you're able to shoot shots all day long and at night. So it's just that's going to be something that the program can actually take care for you. You enter in whatever percentage dryback you want. It's going to compare your live sensor data of what's actually happening, and it's either going to shift your irrigation in time forward or backwards to hit that and potentially supplement you with night shots as well. So that's a benefit. If you weren't using us, all of those things still apply. You're just going to have to do that manually. But yes, are going to have to increase as well.
Perfect. Jory, let us know if you need more follow-up on that, buddy. Next one we have is from Eric. Is there any talk of implementing, oop, there we
Yeah,
go.
well, yeah.
Implementing dew point data readings within the atmospheric sensors would help in dry rooms, especially grow rooms regarding dehumidifiers control. Can do the math, of course, which I do now, but nice to have a readout handy. Um,
Good.
we have talked about dew point stuff in our product council, so just to kind of peek behind the curtain here, we have a long list of all the things that we would love to have in the platform, and we're always actively working on them. Um, Dew point calculations and the like are absolutely on there. What priority they are right now, hard to say because we also just have like a bunch of like really big features we're trying to get out. So it's definitely the conversation. It's definitely something we would like to do. I can't say when we will do anything like that, but Eric, if you keep showing up and you keep bothering me about dew point, I will.
Persistence wins every
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
time.
yeah, yeah. Squeaky
Make
wheel
our
gets the
life
grease,
hell, and
buddy.
it's going to get done.
So yeah, I'm sure that's might not be the most satisfactory answer today, but yes, it's definitely there. And honestly, these sessions going forward are going to be somewhat of what guides our hand on where we're putting our development resources in the future. So yeah, and you know, people in chat, if you guys think that this is, I'm not exactly sure how the upvoting works here, but we can even leave Eric's comment up here. And if people like that, I think you can go give it a little thumbs up. And that's a good indicator if the general consensus of the community is that it's something that we want. Perfect. So next, moving on to Tyler. What's the best way to set an accurate failsafe to avoid overshooting target VWC? Example one, 1 gallon cocoa, uh, two 5 gallon per hour emitters. I set on trigger at 30% and have it kick off at 35%. By the time the event is finished, I may be closer to 40%.
All right, so that's an easy one. The best way is don't use sensor triggers to do that. Utilize the Copilot program, and I can actually show you exactly how to tune that in properly real quick here. I'll go ahead and share my screen with you. All right, so real quick, I'll show you. I'll just go into a Copilot program. The reason that you're having that issue, it's a very common thing, and it's why we actually created this feature, is when you use a regular sensor trigger failsafe, it is based on a sensor trigger. And depending on your pot size, 1 gallon, it's usually not that big of a delay, and especially when you're using 2.5s, that's usually plenty to get you a reading within about a minute. Sometimes it doesn't always work out that way, though. It's very variable depending on the consistency of the cocoa, how densely it's packed in, whatever the hell else is going on inside the substrate. So you're putting drippers and you're doing a low flow volume from the top and your sensor's down at the bottom. So as you can assume, when you start that dripper flow, it has to wick its way down. You're not just, pissing water in there with like a shower or a watering wand. It's slow flow drip, which means it wicks, it wicks, it wicks, and it makes its way down to the sensor where it eventually will change the permittivity and or the reading. So this problem is usually way more pronounced when you're in a larger pot and still running low flow emitters like that because obviously it's a lot more volume to have to wick through. And so by the time that you, like you just said, by the time that you get that full registration, you've already way irrigated and then it's going to spike afterwards. So that's why with our failsafe in the program here, It's not just a sensor trigger, it is a sensor trigger with timer and reevaluation constraints. So basically what this says now is when zone 1 moisture falls below, and I can set this value to whatever I want. So in your case, fuck, I don't remember what it was 30%.
30.
Yeah, I would set this value right here to 30%. Um, and with that being, yeah, it's a little fucked up here right now. But anyway, 30% or close to it. And now what this means, but it also, you see, it says between these times now, I have the valve can be turned on for, and then I have a time constraint and then a reevaluation period. And basically what this means is it's operating in two ways. This part here, part A, is a sensor trigger. So if I was in rock wool or in usually a 1 gallon cocoa pot, I'm going to get a reading within 30 seconds to a minute, right, from the time my irrigation starts. So if I was to hit below 30, I hit, let's just say 29.5 or whatever, it's going to kick the sensor trigger on just like your rule. The difference is it can either shut off when it hits 30, like the rule, or a max runtime, and it's going to be whichever comes first. So for I usually try to match this close to what my P1 shot size is, so I know at the most I'm not going to get more than like say a 3% shot because that's usually what I set my P1s to. But I can make this down to a minute if I wanted to and make sure it's a 1% shot and keep that line super flat. So basically what it allows is it's like if I dip below my target, going to turn that valve on and I'm either going to irrigate until I reach my target again or until I reach this max runtime, whichever comes first. If I end up exceeding this max runtime, let's say I hit 2 minutes on that valve being turned on and I still haven't hit 30%, it's going to wait however long I sit here. I usually do 15 to 30 minutes. That's usually plenty. And it's then going to recheck my live sensor data. And if I'm still below 30, it's going to rinse and repeat and have that dual functionality, whichever comes first. And then it's going to recheck and it'll just sit there and do this all night long. And that is when you tune this properly, you're going to end up with a perfectly flat line or damn close to it with like a very small jumps in between. And that will pretty much solve any overwatering issues that happens from a live sensor trigger. And that is another reason, like I was saying, another reason to use Copilot. Because even if I did not have autopilot turned on and it's just Copilot, it's the same shit, dude. It's a timer sequence right here. Like it's just a straight timer sequence, but I have this option now and it is tunable for me. I don't have to listen to suggestions. I don't have to apply anything. It is just running my timer sequence, giving me a visual graph that's updatable and I can see exactly what's going down. And I have this option here. So hopefully that makes sense. If you got any more questions, I'm happy to delve a little further, but I think that should have answered it.
Yeah, and Tyler, another reason why we try to stay away from moment-to-moment sensor triggers is there's also just, there's we could be relying on a network connection, if you're transporting data packets wirelessly.
Or
And
you
so
trip over the sensor and pull it
you
out.
trip on a sensor and pull it out, and then it's reading zero. There's a lot of things that can go wrong when you're dependent on a live reading, and that's kind of what Copilot was designed around. Like we had an original kind of Copilot setup that was basically strictly off of sensor triggers, and some people still use it. They like it, but there is a lot of things that can kind of go wrong that are just kind of the user error thing, and it's not very satisfying when something goes wrong and it's oh shoot, I kicked it out, and that's why I just override the heck out of my plants. So let us know if you need anything more on that, Tyler. Great question. Here we go from Muriel. Why does the Copilot get info only from one sensor? Can you guys make it so it takes the average of all sensors?
Absolutely. So that's actually how you're supposed to run it, especially if you are feeding an entire room off one valve or you have multiple substrate sensors in a single valve, like a single zone. I guess I can share my screen again. Maybe I'll just keep it up. So basically, in the information tab right here, now I will say this, you do have to have your average already created, which we usually do through the hardware section here. So you would go into, fuck, where would it be? Whatever controller it is, and then you would create your average. Let's see, is there a better one in here? This is a demo account here. I'm just trying to see what's on here.
While
Uh,
he's looking at that, I'll kind of give a little background here. So if you're using just a straight PIC setup without a core controller, those don't support averaging. It's just too much. The data compiling
So
doesn't work out very well.
you can
But
average just the whole controller.
you can average the entire controller, yes, but you just can't do one to one, like individual zones within the PIC, unless you're partnered with a core, and then that vastly improves your capabilities.
Yeah.
So you can have basically a single average for everything, and then you should be able to select that average as your sensor, like right where Marcus is pointing.
Yeah, so I actually have an average defined here, but like Shay was saying, there's certain scenarios when you can and can't create averages. But say you're running a core panel and or a Connect or something like that, and you've got, two sensors per row. You can create individual averages for each one of those rows with those two sensors or four sensors or however many you have in there. Or if you have like a single PIC to a whole room, you could average everything together and feed it off of a single valve. There's a lot of different options, but either way, once the average has been created, you just select it as your sensor here. And now that's what the program is going to reference is that specific data instead of one specific piece of data.
And Miro, one thing I
Right
would
here.
say is if you're having kind of trouble figuring out how to do that, the knowledge base, we have videos on how to do it. Even in the app, there's the little chat bot inside of there. If you ask it how to make an average, it should pull up it should pull you up like basically a step-by-step guide on how to do it. If you're still having trouble, give the support line a call. We'd be more than happy to walk you through doing that for you, buddy.
Yeah.
Cool, great question. Let's see here. All right, going to Dan. If landing too heavy slash wet, would you recommend pushing out the P1 feed to later in the day or lowering the total amount of volume in today's feed to hit FC and allow maximum time for proper dryback tomorrow?
Think Dan is also the same person that was questioning about the 6x6 cubes.
Oh, gotcha, gotcha.
So I think
So
that's a follow-up question.
if landing too heavy wet, I'm going to assume by that, correct me if I'm wrong here, when you say landing, that means you're starting your next day, like your next P1 sequence too wet. Um, that's what I would assume you mean by that. Everything else I understand there. Yeah, if you're like finishing your P3, and it is just too wet for the following day, I would not push out my P1 feed until later in the day. I always prioritize circadian rhythm. I always have the exact same P1 start time. What I would do is, depending on how heavy you were, I would either cancel the feeds for that day altogether and let that substrate dry out so that I can even if I have to use the failsafe, let's just say I don't hit my target until that night, like the following day's night, and then I have to have a couple failsafe shots to hold me at whatever target I needed to be until I get to the following day, that's okay. But I would never sit there and compound wetness like that. That's how you're going to lead to, a lot of stunted growth and a lot of other pathogen issues. Um, so yeah, if it was me and that was happening, as long as I'm understanding it correctly, I would keep my P1 start time the same. And what I would do is I mean, check your dryback level. So that's the other thing here is like, what are we looking to do, right? So is this like, I'm assuming if you're only giving P1s and you're not giving any P2s at all, that this is probably a generative steer in weeks 1 through 3. You're probably trying to push a larger dryback, probably say 20, 30% or something like that. And when I'm meaning that, I mean absolute. I'm going on a lot of assumptions here, by the way. So correct me if I'm wrong. But in that scenario, yes, I would absolutely wait a few days, or I wait a day or however long I needed to get to that dry level and then start fresh the following day, even if it was like a every 48-hour sequence, so that I made sure I got that dry back that I wanted. There are also methods that we can do if it is in turn, if I'm correct in assuming it's a generative steer. We have other options inside of Copilot, which I'm sure we're going to cover deeply here, which is the FC lock. So you do have the option to turn on a field capacity lock, which is think of it like the opposite of an overnight failsafe, where I can basically set a max point, max VWC that my substrate can go to. So for example, if you're like, okay, I wanna cap it at 60, right? Like maybe I can get to 63, but I want to cap it at 60 and make sure it does not overwater it on, and that will help a little bit. But you have to know every time you use that, and you cut down your actual field capacity and what you're getting up to, you are going to potentially cause stacking to occur, which is usually goes hand in hand with what we're trying to do in gen steering, and that's why that's part of my strategy is I do use that, and I can show it off if we want to, but that would be another option that you could do, especially in your situation there. So if I'm trying to achieve a certain percentage dryback, I'm also trying to stack EC, let's just say that's a good option to do as well. And when you do cut down where your field capacity is, so instead of going to 60, maybe you only go to 50, that also decreases the amount of dryback that you need to achieve as well, which can also help you out in hitting that dryback properly in a 24-hour period. So you don't have to extend multiple days. Um, Hopefully that answers. If it doesn't, type back in and I can definitely dive deeper and show some examples on that. I don't want to do that right now until we get a couple more questions in, but just let me know if we want to go deeper on that. I'm more than happy to do that.
Awesome. Next is Damien. How often and how do you need to move sensors for the PIC? I have one sensor per tray in all my rooms, and I find I need to move them weekly or two, every other week, I'm sure. And what's the protocol for cleaning them? I know about root zone growth and such, just wondering how often you have to.
So I only move the sensors when I have to. So I'm always looking at my readings. I'm always watching the trends, especially because you only have one sensor per tray. It's a little bit harder to overlay all of them unless you're feeding every tray the same in the room. Like if everything's got the exact same irrigation schedule, it's really, really easy to overlay all those sensors on top of each other and look for problems in the trends there. So for example, everything's all sticking within, let's say 5% of each other. And then all of a sudden one sensor just starts trailing off to the bottom or stops getting up to the right field capacity, or just we've also seen runaway cases where it just goes nuts and goes way, way higher than it should be. Anytime I have an abnormality in what I would expect to see, that's when I know, that's like my cue point to get into the room, go pick up the pot. Does it feel like this sensor is reading right now? For example, if I'm expecting it to be 50% and it's reading max of 30% or something, I'm going to go in there and lift it up. Does it feel like 30%? Or does it feel like all the others that are currently reading 50% in terms of weight? If it does feel the same as all the others and it doesn't feel like what that sensor is reading, that's a sure sign I need to move that sensor, right? And that rules out, was it a clogged dripper that's actually causing, the fact that it's down to 35, just as in this specific example. But what I would do is, I mean, that's my sure sign to remove that sensor and then replace it back in fresh holes. And you can use the same substrate to do that in. But if you're finding that you're just having an issue altogether, you can move it to a nearby substrate that weighs very similar. There's a ton of reasons why probe drift happens. It can happen from permittivity changes that are a little too extreme. It can happen from root growth wrapping around the tines of the sensor. It can happen from compaction in the cocoa forming little caverns that we found in around there's gentle movement around the probe. It's going to actually create a cavern inside, which allows water to pool and then drain out and causes crazy spikes. There's a whole lot of shit that can go wrong. There could be air pockets in there or like layers of cocoa that was like not hydrated properly. Like there's all sorts of shit that can happen. And to try to think like why, what's going on here, you'll just drive yourself crazy. So it's much better to just realize there's a problem, take it out, and reinsert it back in, and hopefully try to get it fixed at that point. Um, and again, like I said, I only move them when I see a trend change. And that's well, I would say I only move them when I see a trend change, or, like going back to earlier, what we talked about, when our field capacity happens to drop below my minimum threshold. So if I am watering, and when I say field capacity, I'm not meaning artificial. I'm not meaning what I'm allowing it to get up to. I'm meaning field capacity in the sense of how these probes read, which is where you turn that dripper on and it starts irrigating and you're pissing out runoff and it is just not rising anymore. It kind of will go up, 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 and then flatline at a set reading. And when that happens, that's the sensor telling you, hey, I'm at field capacity reading. If that reading is below 50, I'm going to move it. I don't care if it's because of root growth. I don't care what the hell it's from. I'm going to move it down slightly, put it in a different pot, whatever I have to do to get that reading back over 50 because there's no substrate out there that should be reading less than 50 at full saturation. So if it's those two things, then we use them. I typically do not have to adjust them every week. It takes the initial adjustment to get everything kind of within. I like to keep everything within about 5% of each other at the max field capacity line. That's how I calibrate. I go from the top down. So as long as I know my field capacities are all at a set number in the room, then I have at least one stable constant that I can then work off of, right? And if that starts changing, then I know I can adjust that and get it back into the pack with all of the others. Um, but yeah, I mean, in terms of having to move those, you're gonna have to do some work for the first 3 weeks. The plants are growing during stretch. The root masses are growing. They're fighting for canopy competition. Some plants are taking off. Some plants are getting, overshadowed at that point. Their transpiration rates are changing at that point. Usually by week 4, things have stabilized out at that point. And so usually I don't have to go crazy. Um, Yeah, yeah. We don't have to go crazy. I do have I guess I could do that. We do have a little guide, a portion of the guide that illustrates all of this stuff perfectly. We might be able to just share it in here or something, or maybe I could, but it kind of illustrates exactly what I'm kind of talking about here as well. Maybe we do that at the end, because I don't have it
Sounds
pulled up
good.
right now. Hopefully that answers.
Good question, Damien. Yeah, we typically a lot of people have that same question. It's context is really the big thing that matters. This next one's from Jason. When stacking using the failsafe in early gen, do you recommend using small P2s that don't maintain field capacity when running a slow stacking nutrient line once your weeks into stacking, or just sticking to applying all shots with the failsafe?
I stick to applying all shots with the failsafe, and I'll demonstrate exactly why there real quick. Um, So, all right, in this example here, this is a generative steer. You guys can see this, right? Um,
Yeah, you're good.
okay, cool. So this is a generative steer here. Let's just say I'm in weeks 1 through 3 right now. I'm assuming what you're talking about is you're using a field capacity lock. We'll just knock this down to 45, disable the valve. Press save, go back here. Let's see what we looked at. All right. So this is, I'm assuming what you're talking about. You are using your field capacity lock here to basically curb and cap the max moisture content that it's going to. This is a great strategy to use because this green line here, this is our runoff line, right? This is any shots that you give within, I would say, roughly 5 to 7% of this line has the potential to produce runoff. And the closer you get to the line, the more runoff it's going to produce just due to the water holding capacity. So when you cut it down and you don't let it get up that high, you have zero chance of producing runoff unless these P1 shots are way too large and then you're just channeling out, which you're going to want to fix anyway. So as long as you got these things sized properly, you're at a 0% chance of producing runoff using this strategy. Now, this works great if you're using a fast stacking nutrient line like Athena or HGV or something along those lines. They tend to stack pretty quick, usually like around 5 days or so. Um, but when you start using a slower stacking line, and there's a lot more of those out there than there is fast stacking, you can run into issues like what you're saying, where, when you cut this down, your dryback ends up being too large. So if this was a 30% dryback, right, that means whatever goes up, I have to give 30% moisture content to get up here. And that also means I have to have 30% moisture content drying back because whatever goes up has to come down to equate itself. So when you cut that in half now I only have a 15% rise that I got to give, which means I'm only allotting for a 15% dryback at this point. Um, and that's great early flower when, let's just say you veg for like 9 to 14 days or something. You got a small plant, it can't drink 30% right off the rip. Well, this is a fantastic strategy to use. This is what I use because 15% is doable. That means I'm getting a fresh cycle every single day. I'm running drought stress with lights on, which is great for generative steer, and I'm also stacking EC because there is zero runoff occurring. However, if it's a slow stacking strain, and I've personally done this very long, over 18 days, without pushing a drop of runoff, what ends up happening is your root mass explodes, right? And you're definitely drinking more than 15% there. And so what ends up happening then is you're going up, you're stopping, you're drying back, you're hitting your minimum target, sometimes even when the lights are still on. And then you're just forced to rely on fail safes. So I think what he was asking is would it be better to enable some P2s here, to extend that out? Um, let's see, hopefully it'll upload here. Would it be better to run P2s here and still stay away from this drought line, but then it pushes our irrigation in time so that I don't have to give these fail-safe shots over here in the nighttime. And you could absolutely do this and it would be okay, but there's one reason why I don't, and that is I don't have science to prove this. I have real world experience that I think proves this to myself. And again, this is just my opinion, but I believe that the real benefit we get with generative steering, the drought stress portion of it is not so much drought stress overnight, but drought stress while the lights are on, while the plant is photosynthesizing and while it is trying to do its thing. To me, that's when it needs the water, and that's when we're depriving it of that. It's causing those hormonal metabolic responses that we're trying to get. So if I can, I want to get as much of drought stress possible while the lights are on. That is the time I prioritize having as much dryback as possible. And so I would much rather spend the majority, 75% of my day in a drought stress and then give shots all night long. And the other thing with that too is you got to think about it like this is anytime we run a strategy like this and we're giving nighttime shots here to keep up, all we're doing is deferring these P1 shots. We're still giving the same, we're still watering them, we're still giving them nutrients. We're just giving them at a time, instead of up here where we're in danger of pushing runoff, we're giving it at a time where there's a 0% chance that I'm going to push runoff because I am so far away from this green runoff line up here of my field capacity that I have no concern at all when that's going to happen. Um, and so the thing is also with that is when we're talking about nutrient usage and how much nutrients we're running, if I was to give 5 shots here, let's say I had to give another 5 or 6 shots here, I know for a fact that's a timer. This is a 2.5 minute shot, which means, I don't know, times that by six, that I'm terrible at math. That's like 13 or 14 minutes worth of irrigation that I would have to give here, right? That I'm now deferring down to here. The difference is this is not a set timer. This is a set sensor trigger with a max runtime. So it's very possible at this point here that instead of giving, I don't know, 6 2.5 minute shots, I might only have to give, because I'm trying to hold a single line, I might only have to give, I don't know, 10 30-second shots or 10 15-second shots, however long it needs. This is a real world, how much moisture do I need? And I'm not going to go over that. So what I often find is even if I'm giving a bunch of shots in the nighttime, I'm coming out to way less volume of water that's going through than I would if I was giving those here or even in P2s during the day. So it actually saves a lot of water, and that's pretty important to me because a lot of times we end up with problems with dehu load. Nobody ever has enough dehu in their rooms to handle it. And the more water you put into the plant, the more water that's coming out into the air that you're going to have to take care of. So limiting that amount of water to only what's needed not only saves costs, but it also saves your devices and it keeps your VPD in the range that your units can handle. So I have a multifaceted reason there. Hopefully that wasn't too much. Again, I can always go further, but to answer your question, short answer, no, I always put them at night. I do not put them in the day for all of those reasons. And yeah, I think that was it. So
Cool.
hopefully that was good.
Let us know if you guys need any follow-up to that. Heading now to Roberto. I'm using Quick Fill Cocoa Core that is supposed to have 60% VWC. Why does the sensor sometimes give me more than 60% VWC?
Yeah, it's a good question. I get this all the time, and that's why, again, I think we should post the sensor portion of the strategy guide because it explains this very, very well. But basically, these substrate manufacturers, they're giving you rough estimates, right? they're saying, hey, based on the density, the consistency of this cocoa, whether it's a lot of pith, a lot of chip, whatever, how tightly we packed it, all of that, they're saying this should equate to roughly around this point, right? And when they say 60%, they're meaning that has a lot more pith in it, right? A lot more coffee ground material, thinly ground. Whereas if they're like, hey, this is a 40% or something, that means it's got a lot of chip in it, a lot of air pockets in there. So they're just kind of letting you know this is what it should get to. This is what you should expect based on the consistency of our mix that we've assembled here. And so to try and hit that number again, you will drive yourself crazy. It's the same thing with rock wool too. They say technically you're supposed to get to like 65, 70%. Well, I've used a whole bunch of different brands of rock wool, and I guarantee you can start squeezing them on the side. The denser it is, the harder it is, higher your moisture content's going to be. It's got a higher density. The more spongier and softer it is, yeah, you might get up there, but watch how fast you dry back because it's mostly air. It's a temporary reading. So like you can't these substrates, there's never one size fits all or like I have to hit this. That's why I like to take control of my field capacity reading with the sensors, and it's because I know how they work. Like I know for a fact it is based on a permittivity calculation, which means how wet is that substrate? How well can it conduct electricity through there? They're both directly correlated, so you can just think of it as like how wet is this? And so because of that, I know that when I bring that sensor lower into the substrate, even if it's like a centimeter lower, which is usually about the increment that I adjust things by, if I move it a finger width or a centimeter lower, what am I doing? I am moving the probe into an area with um, a higher moisture content because of gravity. Gravity pulls all the water down and it all, accumulates towards the bottom there. That's where the permittivity is going to be higher. And so as I move that down, my reading is going to go up, right? Because the immediate surrounding area has more water in it. If I move that sensor up even a centimeter from where it's at currently, I am now moving away from that accumulation of water in there, and therefore it is going to go down. My reading is going to start reading instead of 60, it's going to now read 55 or 50 or whatever it happens to be. So I know for a fact it's very, very easy for me to adjust what that number is on where my height placement is. And you can't just go with like, oh, I think this is going to be a 1%, or I think this is going to be like a 1 inch placement because of my substrate type. It's never as cut and dry as that because, again, like we talked about, what happens if you got an air pocket the size of a golf ball inside of your rock wool block that you just so happen to stab into? Or what happens if you're using a quick fill cocoa and you didn't quite hydrate it right and you've got a couple crunchy, thin, paper thin layers in there that aren't absorbing water and the probe is touching those, so now it's open air? What happens if you got 50% perlite in there and half of your probe is sitting on perlite where it doesn't read that moisture and is now reporting lower? There's just so many reasons where you just have to adapt whatever your height placement is to what type of substrate you're using and roll with it from there. If you end up with, one-offs on, well, these pots were all at 1 inch, but this one pot I need to go to an inch and a half, or this one I need to go to a 0.75 inches from the bottom. You can change things up, and that's why I like to adjust, like we talked about earlier. I like to adjust my sensors based on my peak field capacity reading. So like anytime I do an adjustment, I turn them drippers on, I let it start pissing run off, I wait until it caps out and it's not going any higher, and that's my golden age of where, or my golden time of when I can sit there and move it to hit wherever I want it to hit. So if you want 60%, get your substrate wet and adjust your probe. If it's 55, adjust it down a centimeter and see where you're at on the live reading. You should get close to 60 or even higher. If you're at, whatever, 70% right now and you're like it should be 60, you can move it up higher until you get to 60, and that's going to be the sweet spot for where you're at. Um, I would I would let it I would take control of that if I were you and not focus so hard on the specific number that it's reading. Just make sure that the number that you're hitting at field capacity is within the 50 to 65% range. And the reason I say that is because when all probes, it doesn't matter if it's a TDR probe, a capacitance-based probe from us or from, Meter Group or wherever else that you're using probes from, they all are based on a permittivity calculation. And when you get out of an optimal permittivity range, meaning, oh, I'm down below 20% moisture content, or I'm fucking soaked at 80%, or whatever it happens to be, those calculations are now skewed. And the data that you're going to get, it's not as accurate as it could be if you kept it within the 20, usually at around the 20, 25 is the minimum, to around a 65, 70% range. If you stay within that 50 to 60% window, you're going to get the best accuracy you possibly can for those sensors that you paid so much money for. So it's like you got a tool, you need to use it correctly and take control of basically the range at which they're operating so that you're guaranteeing you're going to get the best bang for your buck when it comes to the data that you're getting. And so you keep it at a minimum of 50%. And I say minimum there, that allows you to drive back 30%, like I said earlier, and you're not within that danger zone because you start dipping below 20%. Even though the EC might not spike on a TDR probe, shit is still going to be um, the data is still not going to be like your EC readings and everything is still not going to be as accurate as it could be had you kept it in within the ideal range for the math calculations to work. So hopefully,
Uh, Marcus, I'm going to grab one from the chat
yeah.
here, and then I'll read you another
Yeah,
one
there's
from the
two of
chat.
them in chat. We'll get to before Eric's next one.
So Casey, when calibrating ECPH probes with the new manual calibration setting, locking the two voltage points, how long should you leave it in the solution? Find the numbers still fluctuating around after 60 seconds plus. So typically what I'll do when I'm doing the calibration is obviously when you take that sensor and you drop it in that solution, that reading is going to move drastically for a while. Once I see that excuse me, once I see that reading settles, I'll typically start counting in my head and I'll let it sit in there for about 45 seconds. Once it's at 45 seconds, I'll lock that in, move to the next probe, stick that in the solution, wait for that to somewhat settle down. And then once I see it settling, I'll count to 45, hit that, move on to the next one.
There's
So
always going to be a small amount of fluctuation going on. I mean, that's just it's never going to sit basically perfectly still, especially when you're like have the better sensors because their tolerances are just so large. Well, I mean, they're looking at such small data sets that you'll always see a little bit of bouncing around. But if you're seeing like 0.01 amount of fluctuation, like somewhere in like the hundredth column, I wouldn't be too worried about that. But yeah, what Freddie said is
I have also seen with the pH probes, because the way that those work is it will actually be either pulling ions or giving ions to the solution, depending on what
sure.
it's plugged in. So if you let it sit in there forever, it might just continually to start pull ions from that solution, and your reading might just like continually start to go down. I've seen that as well. So, like I said, I just usually do about 45 seconds, and that'll be good. And then the other one here from James,
James, yeah.
I'll get this one, let Marcus do this one. Hi guys, while I'm steering generative, is it okay to utilize P1 start VWC? I'm currently doing this in 2 gallon cocoa hitting 45% dryback, but I've noticed that most days it doesn't irrigate till late on in the lights on cycle. It's currently on 6 a.m., off 6 p.m., and most days it will start irrigation around 3 p.m. Will this be okay for the plants?
Yeah, it's like that kind of touches back on what we kind of just talked about earlier with actually, I don't even remember which question now. I'll share my screen and talk about why I don't do that. Um, I'll say this always. I'll go ahead and get rid of you guys see the screen. All right, I'll go ahead and get rid of this field capacity lock real quick.
Casey, I saw your comment here. Yeah, I wouldn't worry about the hundredth place bouncing around too much, buddy.
So yeah, the reason, yeah, what's happening, like you said, is you're prioritizing start VWC, which means that this right here, the start P1, is going to basically change all throughout the day based on whatever the starting VWC number is. Here's why I don't use that. Two reasons. One, I like circadian rhythm. It makes it when you're dealing with a whole lot of irrigation strategies, let's just say you got a facility or a whole bunch of stuff going on, you need to be able to tell when your pumps are going to be able to run, when they're not. Also, plants have, I mean, they might not have consciousnesses like we have, but they do recognize circadian rhythm. I mean, that's why they start drooping their leaves and they start praying when the lights are about to come on. I mean, they know when night is, they know when day is, and they know typically what their schedule is going to be. When you start changing that up, you're adding another stress onto them, which sure could be considered a good thing when generative steering, but there's other ways we can do that that is like way more controlled and I think would generate a better response. But ultimately, you are potentially just doing the exact same thing that you would be doing. So I guess let me explain like this. If you were to shift this, right? Like let's just say I shifted my start point and it went to 4 p.m. Let's see if I can do that here. I can go 9 and I can do 4 p.m. just so I could show it on the graph here. If because I was waiting till a certain point to hit that, it shifted my graph like this. Well, now what's going to end up happening is now I've shifted the goalpost. I'm gonna drink, I'm gonna dry back, and then it's gonna repeat this the next day as long as I hit my target. So now you're in this cycle where you're getting your plant as wet as can be before lights off, and then you're drying out, which, you know what? You got a lot of drought stress during the daytime. I don't think it's necessarily the worst thing, but if you're going to do that, I would keep it consistent. I would not shift this around all the time. And that's why I do not like this start VWC option. This option was included because in our old program, we had a sensor trigger based start that a lot of people really liked. They were like, okay, I want to be able to start. I want to make sure I dry back, let's just say 3% from the start of the lights on before I start my irrigations and do not start them until that. That was a cool feature, right? That's impossible to do with timers the way we have this set up now, which is a hell of a lot safer than what our old program was. And so a lot of people think that this right here is that, and it is not. This is basically saying like, hey, I'm gonna look at what your dryback was. I'm gonna do the calculation and make sure that I mess with your irrigation start time. I'm gonna move that around until I've determined that this is the time that it's gonna happen. So 24 hours from now, it's gonna adjust your start time so that this hits, and that's great. It'll hit. But do you know if you were to do the same thing, if you were to select start time, the program is going to do the exact same thing, except the difference is instead of changing your start time as the variable, it's going to change your irrigation in time as the variable. So it's going to move your irrigation in time forward or backwards so that you actually hit where you're supposed to be hitting. And so both of those options in theory, like when you look at the code, they do the exact same thing. They're just using a different point as a variable. And so if you choose this, and I say, for example, in my targets, I want a 3% additional dryback, that program is going to figure out, and it's going to give you the suggestions. What do I have to do? I'm going to go ahead and set this back here. What do I have to do? What do I need to make my irrigation end time to time that dryback? What PM? Sorry. What do I need to do to make sure that I hit whatever that target VWC is at this specific time? And so everything else out of that point, usually we have P2s during that when this example would occur. So like in this example right here, if I wanted to hit 30% as my starting point when I start my P1s, if I have start VWC selected. I'll go back and just to kind of show this off. What's going to happen is it is going to shift this, my P1 start time, wherever it has to shift it so that I start my P1s at 30%. Whereas if I have start time selected, what it's going to do is it is going to adjust my irrigation in time, so the last P2 here. So let's just say it's going to cut it down to 4 or whatever, it's going to adjust this so that my dryback is timed properly so that I still hit 30%. I'm just hitting it at a stable time each day. So, in my opinion, they both do the same thing, but start time prioritization is absolutely the way to go. Because then you're not all over the place figuring out what the hell's going on. And that's why this program too, it has, if something happened, for example, you're not using P2s, and you're just not going to be able to hit the dryback in time. It has like a threshold where like if it's analyzing the rate of dryback and you're not able to hit the target within like 50% of that target within this time period, it will actually turn off your P1s. It'll turn off everything. But it'll leave this failsafe running. So it'll say, hey, we've determined there's a 0% chance you're going to hit that there's nothing to shave off when you're just giving a P1 sequence and there's nothing else throughout the day. There's not really anything it can do while still getting you up to fuel capacity. So it has nothing to change. And it's going to be like, look, there's no way we're going to be able to hit that. So it's going to turn your timers off for a day, let you dry back. And if it has to, it'll give you a couple safety shots right before lights on so that you start the following day when it turns your timers back on. You start the following day at 30% at 9 a.m. and you've rinsed and reset your cycle, right? So you never have to deal with this whole like shifting the goalpost further and further back. And then you're like, oh shit, what am I doing? I'm literally irrigating right before lights on now. Is this my new normal? I always keep it like this. And if it's determined that it can't do anything here to make that happen, it'll turn them off, which in my opinion is the best move, you know? So hopefully that answers your question there. Sorry, if you guys haven't noticed, I rant a lot. So whenever
Hey,
I
that's
get
what we're
in a
here, man.
question, I just,
Um, I did see Eric his that next upcoming question. He had to jump off, but I let him know. Hopefully, we can get his question answered via email or something like that. So I think
Sounds
that's
good. We're just planning on doing this for an hour today, guys. We're coming to the end of the hour. I see Damien just asking quickly for tips on cleaning the tines. Really just a wet rag, just a wet rag, just kind of gently buff it off of there. Just you don't got to use any kind of crazy cleaners or anything
yeah,
like that.
soap and water. Don't go anything
Yeah.
crazy other than soap and water. And as long as you don't go multiple runs without moving your probe or cleaning them, you're not really going to have too much of an issue. I have definitely left probes in for like several runs without touching them and got a scale on them that I literally couldn't get off without scraping with a razor blade. There's no household cleaner that's going to do it. I'll tell you that. I tried. So, soap and water and just kind of between runs, just clean them off. Yeah,
Sweet.
should be good.
And then Garrett, yeah, the plan is to actually be hosting these on the website so that there's always going to be a library of these going forward. So basically, the more that we do these, the more of these that we'll have recorded, and it should always be viewable. I'm not sure where we're going to get those hosted yet, but they should be up on the website at some point. Let's see here. Can someone implement these strategies, for example, with access to my account? Daniel, I guess I'm assuming you're asking if we can help you do these strategies. Um, Send support an email if with your questions, sir. And it's hard for I'll just say it's hard for us just to go in and kind of just sit with you for hours and do all this stuff. Growlink's not, unfortunately, we just don't have like the time to do that, but we are here to help in whatever way. Informed questions are great questions that, have a specific endpoint and an outcome you're trying to achieve. We will absolutely answer those for you. So we're,
There's
we're, we're here to help. So just let us know what we can do.
there's actually one more question I see here. It's really quick. I could answer this from Eric.
Yeah.
It's basically just talking about there's when you have under canopy lights and it's
Oh,
generating heat within the canopy, it's changing the leaf surface temp, and then it changes to VPD. Are we doing anything to consider that? I mean, always you have the option if you got the right hardware, because I mean, with our Connect controllers and with our core panels, you have the option to bring in third-party leaf temp sensors, from like Apogee and things like that. And then you can base things off of those. But when it comes to inner canopy, like if you're just like I use a thermal gun, a FLIR camera or whatever, and you can just check your leaf surface temps. Usually it's more important on the canopy level because that's where the most intense radiation is coming from with the lights. Typically under canopies aren't really more than like 100, 120 watts. And if you space those things, like don't just jam them up in your plants and you put them on their stands and they're far enough away from the actual leaves and you've got airflow. If you're going to run under canopies, you have to have inter canopy airflow. Even if you got to run a temporary duct sock down and poke holes in it and just send it out, putting fans up in there, whatever the hell you got to do to get airflow in there, and you're going to dissipate the minimal heat that's going to get generated with that 100 watts of light. It shouldn't really make too huge of a difference. But if you're not dispersing the heat and you're creating a microclimate, it is going to affect it to some degree, but I promise you it ain't going to be the footprint that you're going to be dealing with up top. So I think that's going to be a lot more important to base your environmental parameters on is I do always base my environmental temperature parameters off of leaf temp. So, um, yeah.
Great. We appreciate everybody showing up today, giving really
Yeah,
good
thanks, guys.
questions. We're gonna start trying to do this. I think bi-weekly is what we're hoping to do. We'll kind of flirt with that cadence for a bit, see if we do it more, see if we do it less. But I think we're gonna definitely try to do another one in February for sure. Yeah, thanks a lot, guys. Really appreciate it. I did notice that somebody had put their hand up at one point. I think it was Giuseppe. Sorry we ran out of time today, brother. Please show up next time. Or if you got some questions, email support at growlink.com. We'll be more than happy to help you out with whatever you need. So that's it for this one, guys. See you in the next one. Have a great one. Good growing.
Thanks, guys.